Hey there, welcome to First Look, brand new microphone edition. I told you change was coming. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, we've been working on how we can make First Look a little bit more polished, and there's going to be a little bit of editing that goes on, a little bit more interactive kind of thing that we can do. It's still going to just be basically me talking to myself for 25 minutes, but hopefully you'll be able to hear me better. And then I think there's some other improvements that are coming along the way. I think they're going to just replace me and have Timothy Chalamet do this from now on, just so that's better also. But don't worry, it's not going to become like a podcast or anything. I'm not going to sell you vitamins or timeshares or cryptocurrency or any of those things either. There's just going to be a little bit more polish and hopefully a little bit more like crispness in the quality. So that's the goal. Anyway, so thank you for joining us this week. And so this coming week is another really special week. I say it's a special week often, but I want you to realize that I don't do that because it doesn't mean it's not. I say that because I feel like we spend, I think sometimes when you go to church, you can feel like every week's kind of similar. And you can look at church like that, but I think when we intentionally look ahead and plan around, what can be special about that particular week, and then make it so. That way it kind of breaks up anything that could feel like we're talking about the Bible again, right? Like, I mean, you're trying to make everything week, try to make that unique. And this week is especially true because we have our second installment of the Centennial sermon series. And this one will be done by none other than Dave Antonsen. And so May 4th, Dave will be here. He's traveling I think he's coming from Arizona. They spend some of the year in Arizona and some of the year in California. And so he's agreed to come and be with us this weekend. By then, the parking lot will be completed because it just started today. And so if you didn't get a chance to say goodbye to the old parking lot, or you wanted to try to get a piece of the old parking lot, before it gets bulldozed, this is your moment to do it. You should run down there and get a piece of it before you can sell it online or something like that. Or just, pass it along to your grandkids. Anyway, that's happening this week. So everything should be new and clean and ready to go for Sunday. And so we're excited to have Dave here and all that brings. He and I will be presiding over the communion table together, which will be exciting. So all that is happening. So with that anticipation comes the sermon that he's giving. And as I have in the past, whenever we have a guest preacher, that doesn't mean that I take the week off from First Look. It just means that you're going to get a different kind of perspective on what that person is preaching. We did that with Alec Kennedy, and we'll do it with other folks. But Dave Antonsen's this week, and he's also preaching out of John, different part of John as I was last week. The next preacher, just so you are kind of looking down the pike, the first Sunday in June, which I think is June 1st, Tyler Domsky and I are actually going to be swapping. So Tyler, if you remember, is the pastor at Wexford Community. We do lots of things with them. He was the associate pastor here several years ago. He and I are going to swap pulpits on June 1st. So that's the next installment after Dave. But for now, that's where we're headed, is this passage that was chosen. It's another post-Easter passage, and this is John 21 verses 1 through 19. And I may kind of summarize some parts of this. Just reading 19 verses to you may not be necessary, but since you're going to get it on Sunday also. But I wanted to at least give you the highlights about where we are in Scripture. So John 21, 1 through 19. I'll start off just to kind of give you an idea of where we are. This is a passage where Jesus and Peter are talking back and forth, that kind of thing. So, starting in verse 1. After these things, Jesus showed himself again to the disciples by the Sea of Galilee, or Sea of Tiberias, same. And he showed himself in this way. He gathered together were Simon Peter, Thomas, called the twin, Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, the two others of his disciples. Simon Peter said to them, I am going fishing. And they said to him, then we will go with you. And they went out and got into the boat that night, but caught nothing. So then this is the passage where Jesus commands them, and then they end up bringing up tons of fish. When they had gone ashore, they saw a fire, and then they grill the fish, and they have lunch on the beach. Verse 12, Jesus said to them, come and have breakfast. Now none of the disciples dared to ask him, who are you? Because they knew it was the Lord. I think that there was still something kind of stunning about just the idea of meeting face to face with Jesus. It's also early in the morning. This was now the third time that Jesus appeared to the disciples after he was raised from the dead. So then this is the portion of that interaction that's just Jesus and Peter. Okay. When he had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? They go back and forth for a second, but let me remind you about what's important about this particular text. Peter, of course, is the one that denied Jesus. And so we carry that experience, that feeling into this text. You really can't read this passage without remembering that connection. Because for as many things, as many times as Jesus had appeared to them, whatever, this is one of the main one-on-one interactions that we see between these two people post-crucifixion. So you would imagine, since for us it feels like a lot of time has passed, but in reality not much time has passed at all. This was maybe a week or a few weeks before. Peter would have had that heavy on his heart, heavy on his mind, right? In the same way that if Judas had not taken his own life and he was having an interaction with Jesus, he obviously would have that on his mind, right? There'd be no way that could happen. So this is the last thing that Peter did before Jesus dies, and so of course this is heavy on his heart. Okay, so that's the context. Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? He said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Now, the way that you read that, I think I read it in a calm, kind of collected way, like, yes, of course I do. But I don't think that's the way Peter said that. I think he says that with tears in his eyes. I think he says that with maybe a little trembling. Like he wants to be confident. He wants to be reassuring. But how could you not go into that with some level of fear or nervousness or anxiety, whatever you want to call it? So, yes, Lord, I know that you know that I love you. And Jesus said to him, tend my sheep. So Jesus doesn't go into, well, why did you do this? There's no guilt trip. There's no, you should have known better. Why didn't you have confidence? There's none of that. It's if this is still true, if this is still who you are, then now you have work to do. Now you have to get to the work of making this whole. And the only way you're going to do that is by tending my sheep. So he asked him again. He says, Peter felt hurt because he had said to him a third time. So he said it again. He says, tend my sheep. And then he says it a third time. And then Peter starts to feel hurt because he had said it a third time. Do you love me? And he said, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. Kind of implying that at some point, if you're trying to test me, then it's worked because this is how I feel. But knowing everything, you're asking me. If you're asking me to kind of think about whether I really love you, you know the answer. So me telling you is really just about me discovering for myself how far I'm willing to go. But he could also be hurt by that because, that guilt and longing and regret, I'm sure, follows him. And so it must feel like at some point, like, is Jesus trying to bait me into or just get me to say, I don't know if I do, because clearly I rejected you. I said I didn't know you. Maybe I don't, right? This is a gut check time. But the gut check doesn't come with then you shouldn't have done that, right? If you really loved me, then it's not an interrogation of what has gone before. All of these questions are about trying to set the stage for what's going to be, right? Not that Jesus has moved on, but is trust Peter enough that if Peter says, I love you, then by loving Jesus, that means you're in this. You're ready. You're not going to let the mistakes or anything that you did before deter you from continuing the work that we have been doing. Because Jesus needs Peter to believe that he can do the next thing, right? Jesus already knows if Peter can do the next thing. Jesus doesn't need convinced, but he needs to be able to make sure that Peter believes that Peter can do the next thing. Okay. Feed my sheep. Very truly I tell you, this is verse 18. Very truly I tell you, when you were younger, you used to fasten your own belt and go wherever you wished. But when you grow old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will fasten a belt around you and take you where you do not wish to go. He said this to indicate the kind of death by which he would glorify God. After this, he said to him, follow me. So, I think it's a fascinating analogy of you are free now. I know how things will end for you. But you are free now, and you are able to do this now. So this is the time for you. And if you are going to live faithfully, if you're going to live like the leader that I believe that you are, that I've sort of raised you to be, then you're going to need to be someone who feels confident enough in themselves to be able to do this work. And this will not be about you, right? It gives them a goal, a directive. Feed my sheep, right? Tend to my flock. Make your life about other people, right? Because anyone in that situation would tend to want to kind of wallow, right? Woe is me. I wasn't the person that I should have been. I wasn't the person that, Jesus had kind of built me up to be. I denied him, when I didn't have to. Now, if he had said, yes, this is who this is, yes, I do know him, what would have happened to Peter if he had done that? There's a very good chance that he would have not gotten out of there alive, right? He would have been arrested as an associate, and that could have, ended his life too. So knowing that is a very good possibility, in the same way that if the disciples would have stuck around and tried to fight off the army that came to arrest Jesus, they would have probably all been arrested and or killed as well. So they all ran off. I don't think this is a story about bravery. It's a story about, or even devotion, as much as it is self-worth and self-assurance, right? If Peter is going to do the work, then he's going to have to believe in himself. Now, the first part of the passage is kind of another example of that, right? In the first part of the text, they go out fishing, Jesus appears to them, helps them catch the fish, that kind of thing. And then, provides, hey, come and have breakfast, that kind of thing. Kind of provides hospitality for the disciples. That's Jesus doing what Jesus had done for them the whole time he'd known. Providing for them, giving them the tools and resources to succeed, providing invitation, community, safety, well-being, right? And he fed them, right? Because they were his sheep also. And so now Peter has to have the confidence, given everything that's happened, the self-assurance, the wholeness, the foundation within himself, to be able to kind of do the same thing. He has to be able to draw people in. He has to be able to feed them. He has to make sure that, he has to be an extension, a shadow of, a ripple of who Jesus was. And the only way to live into that is to know in your bones and be able to say out loud that I love you and I'm confident and I know that I can be that person. You know that this is who I am. And that's what we see in this text. Now, I think you can probably take those lessons in a lot of different ways, and I'm certainly not going to speculate as to which way Reverend Antonsen's going to go. But if I'm looking at it through the lens of the two things that are coming up this week. One, the Centennial celebration. We're looking at our past and where we've been and how that can influence the kind of confidence and foundation that we need to go into the future. There's a little bit of a pivot there that would make sense to me. That we take what we have known to be good and faithful lessons from the past, and if we are firm in our faith and firm in who Christ is in community, then we can continue to create that ourselves, right? There's a kind of a transition there. But there's also an element too that we're having communion, right? So that's sort of tied into it as well. That drawing in of communion is there. So we have Jesus inviting us to a table, right? Inviting us to commune with him. And then we go from that place where we have stated that this means something to us, that we loved who Jesus is, that we reaffirm our need for the sacrifice and promise of Jesus at the table. We take that experience and then we reflect it out into the world. Feed my sheep, spread my word, that kind of thing. And so we do kind of a small version of this interaction between Jesus and the disciples, and then Jesus and Peter. We do a smaller version of this every time that we commune together, because we don't stay in that place. We go out in the world to share that. And this past week, one of the things that I was kind of trying to get us to do and sit with was, we, like in this text, I told you these texts that come after Easter, from Jesus revealing himself to the disciples, to this interaction here on the beach, to everything that leads us to the ascension. That whole period of time, handful of weeks that they have with Jesus, all of that is a hurry up and get ready, because the ascension is going to happen, and they have to create this the church. They have to create the community that Jesus led them to create, and so they don't really have time to spend a month just sitting back and reflecting on what had happened and how they got here and all that. They have to get to the work of knowing what they're going to do. And so I said we needed to be those who sort of do that for them. We need to take the time to reflect and to think about and to soak in all of that. Because, we are those who continue that legacy too. And I think this is an example of saying, like, this is why that's important. Knowing, Jesus is kind of asking us the same question with the time that we have. Like, do you love me? Are you ready for this? Can you still be the one who shows up and does this work, even despite your own, shortcomings? And I can tell you, as clergy, I can't look at it from any other angle, but as clergy, that's an especially important idea. Because for as many things as I get involved with, and as many things that I do that represent the church and represent our faith in the life that I lead, from, presiding over a funeral like I did today, or, doing the work of committee meetings, or baptisms, or worship, or communion, or sermons, or whatever they happen to be, I get bogged down in the person who is Ben, because I am very often struck by my own fallibility and limitedness, and just error, and tendency to go astray. All of those things are true. Anything that Peter did, I either have or could do tenfold. And so you're still kind of led to that same conclusion about trying to be, to recognize that, one of the important things about worship and our faith is that we continue to check in with ourselves, and we don't let that the overwhelming errors or negative parts, limited parts of ourselves prevent us from doing the next right thing. And I think that's what you see in this text. It's an encouragement to all of us, because none of us are perfect. None of us feel, none of us are saints, in that kind of like bigger than life kind of way. And so, what do we do with that feeling? This may not ring true for you and I in the same way, but I was thinking about this. We're now at a point in history where one pope has passed away, and we don't have a pope yet, right? The Catholic Church is still in the process of getting ready to start the election process, which could take who knows how long. And you think about what it must be like to take on that kind of office. We don't have an equivalent in the Protestant church. There's nothing I can even get, that even touches the level that we put that human on in terms of representing the faith in this way. As close to saintly as you get without having sainthood, as close to, it's ridiculous. I can't even imagine it. And you look at, some popes, even with the best intentions, even who have lived lives of service, still come from, backgrounds and, still had jobs before they became priests, and, were still, whatever. It's got to be overwhelming to be that and think about, well, I used to just do this in school. I used to be this job. I used to whatever. That kind of transition, I can't imagine. Well, on our own way, we all kind of do a piece of that where we realize, like, I have this part of me that is, not always the best, but I am also trying to be faithful. I'm also called to be something else. And that's daunting. And that's why we need community, and that's why, doing this together is so important. So that's kind of my first thoughts about what this could look like. I'll be very intrigued, of course, to hear Reverend Anderson talk about that and talk about what this means for him and what he thinks it means for the church and what it means for our own individual faith. All of that will be fascinating, and I'm looking forward to it. So I encourage you to either be there in person or join us online whenever you can. So that's what I have for this week. I really appreciate the fact that you, now that I'm newly mic'd, we'll see what other little tricks we have up our sleeve in terms of really polishing this thing up and kind of go from there. So hopefully we keep making the experience of this better and better. That's the goal. All right. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for being for continuing to be engaged in what we're doing here at Northmont. Hope you have a wonderful week, and I'll see you next time for another First Look. Take care.